Hey YouTube, this is Steve from Average Joe's Fantasy Football, and welcome back to the channel. We've got another mock draft video to help you guys out with your redraft season. And again, week 1 of the NFL preseason is happening, which means most of you are probably either mock drafting or getting ready to start some of your drafts coming up. We are about a month away, obviously, before NFL kickoff, so hopefully these videos help you guys out with kind of figuring out where these players should be drafted, whether they're going up or down in their stock. So let's talk about it. All right, so as you can see here, we are in the 9th spot of a 12-team full PPR league. If you guys haven't already, I've done 1 through 8. And hopefully you check out those videos if you are in any of those spots, whether you're in one league or multiple. This is the 9th spot of a 12-team league. Now, my strategy before I start this is typically at the 9th spot, I'm going to go obviously running back or wide receiver. Those are 2 positions. I'm not going tight end or quarterback. I have seen it. It's very rare unless it is a super flex or maybe a tight end premium. Now, in the 9th spot, I will try to get a premier wide receiver and then get a running back on the turnaround when it comes to the second round. That's kind of my strategy when it comes to these later picks. Now, you could obviously go 2 solid wide receivers, and then maybe you get a player like Chase Brown, maybe a Bucky Irving, maybe, but typically you'll see like a Chase Brown or Kenneth Walker in the 3rd, getting your number 1 running back there. So that is a strategy. I typically will go wide receiver, running back, and then I'll look at maybe running back or wide receiver on the swing. So let's see how this works out and see how this draft goes. Now, typically when you're looking at this, your 101 most of the time has been Chase or Bijan. Occasionally, I'll see Barkley. It's not as common, but I do see him occasionally. Obviously, Chase is there. Bijan, like those guys are obviously your 1-1, 1-2. That's kind of where you're seeing him. Now, you see obviously the early running backs here, and then it's going to be heavy wide receivers towards the end of that. Now, looking at the options here, I've got Puka, Derrick Henry, JT Collins, like some really good options here. Now, of these options, I do like the wide receiver strategy. I have been able to get players like Lamb or Neighbors in this spot. Now, I'm not in love with Puka Nacua at the 9th spot. Maybe in the 2nd round, I feel like his value is just diminished a little bit. Part of it is I do think you've got the Matthew Stafford back injury. We're not sure how that's going to play out. I do think Stafford's going to play through it. He's a really tough quarterback. But you also have Devontae Adams that I think a lot of people have kind of slept on. I do think he's going to obviously get some targets his way. I like the rookie tight end Ferguson. There's a lot of different factors. So Puka I've dropped just slightly. Not a lot, just slightly. So looking at this, I could go running back here and like Derrick Henry, who's a top running back. JT, I'm hoping I can get. He's typically at the end of the 1st round, maybe the beginning of the 2nd round, so I probably won't get him. But I will go and grab a wide receiver. Again, I want to get a receiver in this one, so I'm going to get Nico Collins. I think he's the best option when it comes to that. As you can tell, the running backs went pretty heavy there. Not surprising. Like I have seen that hero running back strategy. That's typically what I will do. I want a premier running back at least once, maybe twice if I can make that happen, because the wide receiver position is strong in depth. So I did get my wide receiver. Now, looking at these options, it's really tough to overlook another wide receiver. I do like Josh Jacobs here a little early, but I do think he's well worth grabbing. You've got to get him in the 2nd round. So looking at this strategy, I'm going to go the wide receiver route just because of what has happened so far. If I was able to get Achane or JT or something like that, I would have gone that route. But because they are gone, I'm going to go wide receiver. And looking at the wide receiver routes, I'm going to go A.J. Brown. Yes, I take him over Brian Thomas or Drake London. I know the obviously passing game has changed in Philly, but I do think he's still a top wide receiver, and his, I guess you would call floor is wide receiver like 18, 19, but his ceiling is so much higher than that, and I'm going to take that risk in there. Now you start to see the quarterbacks go. Not surprising. You start to see them in usually the 3rd round. You get the rushing quarterbacks, the Lamars, Jaden Daniels, Josh Allen. If you want a quarterback that early, that is a great strategy to go because these guys are absolute monsters and beasts in the fantasy world. But I cannot do that. I'm going to go and get a quarterback typically later. That is my strategy. I believe it's always worked for me because you get some really top 5 quarterbacks late in the draft, and I'll rather fill up my wide receivers and running backs and things like that. So my wide receivers I've got. Really feel good about Nico and AJ Brown. Now I can go running back. Now looking at it, I love the fact that Chase Brown fell to me. Chase Brown is a running back I'm going to go after pretty often if I can, just because I love the offense and he looked really, really good. The last 8 games of the season, he averaged over 18 points a game. Really want him on my backfield. And so getting him is a must. Now this is where things can get a little different, right? So I got my running back, my RB1. I've got my 2 wide receivers. You could possibly go tight end. Like Kittle's a great option. He went a little bit early. I was hoping to get tight end, maybe fourth or fifth, with that type of caliber. But at this point, I'm not going to reach for a Sean Laporta or a Sam Laporta. I'm not going to reach for a tight end at this particular moment. So I'm going to go, again, looking at the best possible player in the position, whether it be wide receiver or, running back. Now, I don't typically do this strategy, but for a quarterback that I believe can have some strong fantasy value because of his rushing ability, and I'd like to pair him up, I'm going to go Jalen Hurts here to pair up with AJ Brown. I'm not a huge fan of stacking all of the time. I do that in a few of my leagues because I like the idea that if my quarterback throws a touchdown and it's typically my wide receiver or maybe a running back, usually a wide receiver, I feel really good about that. Now you're doubling up in points. It's a fantastic strategy. It's worked in a lot of leagues I've been in. So pairing up Jalen Hurts with AJ Brown is a really good one. And let's be honest, Hurts with his rushing ability and those touchdowns near the end zone with the push tush or whatever you want to call it is fantastic. He's going to get you plenty of opportunities there. So looking up the best, again, strategies best available at this point. We're not necessarily filling a need. You want to get the best player that's available. So looking at those best player availables, you've got Jameson, who's a good option as a flex, Pickens, Tetator, McMillan, who looked really good in camp so far. You maybe want to get a running back like R.G. Harvey, maybe Travion Henderson. I think I could get probably Henderson on the swing. So for me, I'm actually going to go and grab Tetator, McMillan. I love this Panthers offense. And McMillan, I think is going to be an awesome wide receiver going into the 2025 season. I liked him a lot coming out of college. One of the better running wide receivers in the league coming out. And I think he is going to be fantastic. I think he's going to really connect really well with Bryce Young. So feel really good as a nice little flex play. Now I'm going to get my running back. I'm going to get Travion Henderson. Look, we're not sure how this backfield is going to look for New England. New head coach, new offensive scheme. Yes, they have, Ramondre Stevenson, who I still like. I think you can get him at a really cheap value later in drafts. But Henderson was drafted by this coaching staff, and they really like him, and he looked really good coming out of college, and he may end up being a really, really great star. So again, Henderson is a really good player to pick up here as my second running back. Typically not who I'd want. I'd rather have him as my third or fourth, but again, I'm looking at the risk of having some really solid wide receivers. So I've got the tight end position. I've got obviously flex. I've got kickers, defense, all that fun stuff. Now, in this particular one, I've got 2 flex here I can put in here. Not a strategy I always have in most leagues. Typically have 1 flex, but I have been in plenty of leagues where we got multiple flex, which makes it a little bit more fun. So looking at this, I've got, again, best player strategy. I've got Jacoby Myers, who I really like. Tyrone Tracy, who right now is the RB1 for the Giants. Maybe I get my tight end here, Evan Ingram. I think he's going to have a great season going forward. So looking at the options here, I'm actually going to go and grab Tony Pollard. I know I didn't mention his name, but Tony Pollard is a really good option. Again, technically a running back 1/running back 2 with potential there. I think he's going to be a solid flex play, good bye week filler because, again, yes, they have Spears, but they're going to use the running back, probably both running backs when it comes to obviously easing Cam Ward into his rookie season. Titans obviously got to establish the run to kind of keep, defenses guessing, and of course to keep defenses off of rushing and blitzing Cam Ward. So I like him there. I look at the wide receivers that are left here. Some couple of options that you got Juwan Jennings, Deebo Samuel, things like that. But I'm going to go again, grab another running back here and get Tyrone Tracy, another starting running back for a roster that I don't necessarily need, but I like filling there because, again, he is an RB1. He can fill some bye weeks. Maybe an injury happens, things like that. You want to have as many solid running backs on your roster to help you out with the rest of the season because the season is long and the season can get to you pretty quickly if you don't have some good depth. So, again, great strategy in my opinion. Now I've got 4 bench players. I got my kicker, defense, and tight end. Again, tight end position is a position I literally, if you can get them super early, that's great. It's a tight end, you're going to get some players like some rookies that came out like Loveland, who I really like. You've got obviously Dalton Kincaid, who had a bad sophomore year, but has potential to be a good one. Tucker Kraft, there's a lot of good options still. But I'm going to grab Emeka Egbuka. Egbuka is a good option here. I know he's not necessarily the wide receiver 2 of the Bucs. He will be probably the first few games or so, depending on how Chris Godwin's injury comes back and how well he comes back from it. But again, he's a nice solid play to fill in for some of my wide receivers here that I've got a bye week or a flex or maybe a really good matchup. So I like Egbuka here. Obviously, if we're talking a dynasty aspect, Emeka has been a player that I think has been rising, especially in rookies and dynasty startups and things like that, because he's got a really good camp. He looks really good so far, and he's obviously a premier wide receiver coming out of college. Now, I like where I'm at right now. I got two tight ends I really like in Kincaid, Kraft. You could even go the Kyle Pitts route. I know the Kyle Pitts experiment's kind of pretty much fizzled. I think everyone's kind of just finally agreed that he's not the tight end we had hoped. But I could get a running back like Jordan Mason, who's a nice little backup to Aaron Jones. Maybe Zach Charbonnet, because Kenneth Walker has had some injuries. You got some backups there. Or even J.K. Dobbins, who could considered the RB1 right now for the Denver Broncos. But I think it's more just, again, a Sean Payton move. I think he's not going to necessarily be the RB1. He'll be a mixture of players there. But of that, I'm going to get my tight end here and get Dalton Kincaid. High-powered offense. Again, Josh Allen's going to get him the ball. I know they've got Dawson Knox there to still deal with, but Kincaid is a really good option still. I'm not looking for him to be obviously a top 10 tight end every single week. He has games he can do that. But if he can finish overall because of some premier games, I absolutely love Kincaid there. Now I've got 3 more bench spots. I've got my kicker and defense. Now, if you know me and watch any of my videos, I don't go kicker or defense early. I'd rather get those players later on. So I'm going to get some, again, positions, wide receiver, running back, things like that. And looking at the options here, I'm going to get Rashid Shaheed, an offense that we're not sure how it's going to play out for the Saints. We don't know who the quarterback is yet so far, but you still have got a player who's a big playmaker who can make some big plays. If you get points in special teams, again, Shaheed is an awesome option to have because, again, you can get some rewards there. And then, of course, again, he is the wide receiver too, and Olave has had some concussion injuries, so Shaheed could be the number 1 at some point. Now, I'm not a big strategy. I don't like the strategy of 2 quarterbacks on a non-superflex or a non-2 QB league. So I will pick up a quarterback later on and things like that. We'll play that route. So I'm not going to pick that up there. I still have 2 players in the flex spot. Now, looking at the players here, you've got Rachaad White. Had some value last season, not super great because Bucky Irving really showed up and showed out really well. You've got maybe Marvin Mims, a couple of big plays here or there, but I actually like the play of take Bigsby. Bigsby might have a bigger value and role this upcoming season for the Jacksonville Jaguars. We're not sure how Liam Cohen's going to use both backs. Obviously, Etienne is still the RB1, and I think he actually has really good value coming up into the season. Bigsby's a nice little, again, backup player that might have some big plays. We'll see how they really play it out there. And then, of course, looking at this, I've got one more flex play and then kickers and wide receivers. You could go backup tight end. You got Isaiah Likely, who's a good option. He's obviously injured right now going into camp, but he'll be back in normal. I can obviously go back to running back or wide receiver. You got players like Trey Benson, Ray Davis, some really good options, maybe even Jerome Ford. We're not sure what Cleveland's doing in the backfield, especially with Judkins, situation. And then you got wide receivers, Bateman, who I really love. You've got Hollywood Brown, Dante Thornton, a nice rookie that a lot of people are sleeping on. But I like the wide receiver route because, again, I want to have as many wide receivers as I can. Bateman is the best option, I think, available here. And again, he looked really good. He got re-signed in extension. They obviously believe in him in Baltimore, so I like him there. Now I've got to get my kickers, defense, all that fun stuff. Kickers, I think, are very important. You want them on a high-powered, so I'm going to stick with the Eagles. Again, high-powered offense. I'll get Jake Elliott. He's a really good kicker in fantasy. And again, in an offense that's going to get you down the field, get you some extra points, and of course, get you in field goal opportunities to have to let your kicker really score. And then last pick. You got to get your defense. You could go defense a little early depending on how much of an importance it is. I waiver wire defenses all year depending on the matchups. I don't necessarily hold one, but it is a strategy you can do. You can get a defense a little bit early and then obviously hold on to them. And looking at the options here, I'm going to go grab the Jets. They've typically have been a good, solid defensive team overall. And again, you got to include the special teams aspect of it too. So again, I like the Jets there at that one. So let's talk about how this went. So that is my draft for the 9th spot of a 12-team league. If you have any questions or maybe you thought this draft went well, maybe you didn't, whatever it is, hit me up in the comments down below. If you do have questions for redraft or even dynasty, hit me up down below as well. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. Make sure you hit the like button as well. Check out all my other content, especially like my other mock drafts or even my hidden gems this upcoming season. Again, hit that subscribe, like, and I'll check you guys out next time.